Hello and welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I am Heartbeat President Jor-El Godsey. Today's episode is an inside conversation about the California trial. You know, the one where we're being sued for abortion pill reversal and other fun things. Joining us today is our General Counsel, Danielle White, and also our Senior Director of Medical Impact, Christa Brown. Both of them were on the ground in California for longer than they wanted to be. I can tell you that for sure. We'll talk about a little bit about that. We'll share some key moments from the courtroom. We'll really give you some personal perspectives, and I think you'll find this interesting. We also want to give you actually a legal update as to what's happening as well. But it's just been quite the adventure from start to finish. It really is a journey that's been about 3 years in the making since first being sued by the state of California. Attorney General Bonta announced this. We learned just after a staff meeting at Heartbeat that this had happened, and we actually learned because a reporter reached out to us. So that was the kind of the start of what we begin to understand as the abortion distortion and how that affects every part of our culture, but also our legal environment as well. So thank you for joining us, Danielle and Christa. Thank you for agreeing to be on and talking about this. I know it's probably the last thing that you really wanted to talk about after having experienced for so many weeks, and it's not finished either. So Danielle, kind of catch us up on where we are, the quick journey to where we are now, and then we'll talk a little bit later about where it goes from here.
Yeah, so the live witness testimony began on June 24th, which was a meaningful date for the movement because that's the anniversary of Dobbs. So on the anniversary of Dobbs, we were there in court defending a woman's right to continue her pregnancy. And so we had almost 6 weeks of live witness testimony out in California, and that period of the trial has concluded. That was an intense period each day in court, lots of witnesses. That part is done, and now the parties are writing their concluding brief for the trial. So, and then we'll be back. That brief is due August 27th, and then we'll be back for closing arguments on September 17th, right there in Oakland.
So what was it like each day? Like when you, I mean, I had the chance to be there for not nearly as many days as you guys were, but what was it like even as you began to step into this adventure from that very first day?
Yeah. So if you can imagine your typical hotel room, the litigation team had taken 2 of those hotel rooms adjoining. They removed all of the typical furniture from those rooms and then put in a couple of tables, conference tables, monitors and screens and things like that. And so that was dubbed the war room. And that was where we were spending many, many, many hours every day. So we would typically convene for breakfast in the morning around 7 o'clock. We'd start talking about strategy and some of the things that
right
were
around the
happening.
Breakfast table, like right off the bat, 7 in the morning.
Yes.
Yep. And then trial would actually begin about 8:45 Pacific Coast time.
Yep. And then that would go until around noon. And we'd take a brief break for lunch and a working break, if you will. We were still kind of digesting what had happened that day in court and talking about what we needed to do to prepare for the next day. And then we would get right back to the war room, and we were usually there until 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And that was kind of the cadence. We did that Monday through Thursday, and then Friday there was no court, so that was the opportunity to fly home for a quick 48-hour touch base at home and then come back to keep going.
Which was a little easier for our some of our attorneys that were right there in California. A little longer trek for us. Danielle, you're based in Ohio, and Christa, you're also you're not in Ohio, you're in Indiana. I want to say Illinois because you're really close to Illinois as well. But so you had a trek as well, and you got to have a different perspective. You weren't sitting with the lawyers at their table, but you were in the audience watching until it was your testimony. Now, unlike me, mine went earlier in the trial. I was in week 2. You were, I think, in week 4, 5, and 6, if I recall, or something like that. Is that several opportunities? So for you sitting and kind of observing what happened, what were some of the things that you witnessed?
Yeah, so this was one of the first times I've ever been in a courtroom. So for me, except for like you've said before, like what you see on TV or in a movie, which it's very different. So I typically sat in the back row so I could observe everything and pray during every testimony. And it was much different than what you see. And I also knew all of the details that had gone into the preparation because I had been in the war room with them until whatever time of night we ended. And so it was interesting to see it all unfold in front of me. And also it was interesting and such a blessing, the four attorneys that Thomas More sent us, to see them in action, to see their fire, to see their determination to win this case. For them, it wasn't just a case. For them, this was revealing truth. For them, this was a fight for life, for freedom of speech. There was so much more that went into this, and they were willing to put in the 14, 15-hour days. There was no doubt that they were going to do that. They weren't hesitating. They weren't complaining. They were all in. And so to see it unfold in front of me, everything that had been prepared, like Danielle said, at the breakfast table, at the lunch table, at the dinner table, in the war room, all the things that had gone into that, to see it unfold in such a way. And I had sat through all the depositions for the last 3 years. Like, I had seen them in little bits, but to see all of them collaborate and see how the Lord gave us very different attorneys who put their minds together to do the very best job to win this case. It was really remarkable to see it in action.
And Krista, you know also, because you had a little different observation point. You knew were connected with the fact that our co-litigants or co-defendants were also on hand praying, that there was a great support that came right from our Real Options friends who are right there in that community, were able to help out as well, right?
Yes, yes. The Real Options team was so amazing. They were there to pray. They were a tremendous support. I can't say enough about what the work that they are doing in California is tremendous, but also they brought that to the courthouse. They brought that to the courtroom, and they were just a tremendous support to me personally and to the entire case.
So Danielle, there were some surprises that we ran into, not the least of which is how many ironies that we encountered in this whole thing. I think, as I recall, our kind of lead counsel Paul was keeping a list of ironies, and it might still be growing even as we're still in the final stages of wrapping all of this up. But what are some of the big ones that come to mind?
Yeah, the most glaring one to me is the fact that the AG has filed this lawsuit claiming that women are being harmed by free abortion pill reversal information, but they can't produce a single woman who claims that she was harmed. And so in all of the 16, 18 years that APR has been going on in California, not one woman came to the AG and raised her hand saying, I was harmed by this. Instead, the only women who took the stand were 3 APR moms who were so happy to have their babies and were so satisfied and grateful for APR and for all of the services that they received, not just through the APR hotline, not just through APR, but through pregnancy help, that broader help and assistance that pregnancy help brings to a woman. And so that when women's voices were heard in this trial, that's what they had to say. This community came around me and provided for me in a time that was difficult for me, and I had a difficult decision to make. And so that was really ironic to me, and to me that was the most glaring irony in the case. The other thing that was interesting to watch it unfold was the complaint, as filed, points to ACOG's position on APR. And ACOG says that APR isn't based in science. And so one of the things that the complaint was pointing out was that our position is a little bit different. And so we don't say what ACOG says about APR. But before we even started the trial, the AG had said in court that ACOG's position on APR is irrelevant. And that was really interesting to watch that change from this is problematic because Heartbeat isn't saying what ACOG says to actually, it doesn't really matter what ACOG says about APR. And I think, one of the reasons for that is some of the testimony that came out from ACOG's corporate representative about the backing that ACOG has for their position, which is quite lacking.
Well, come back and paint some of that of how does ACOG get involved in this conversation to begin with, because they were not, they're not, they weren't really in the litigation, except by the references that you made. But we did find some things that needed additional um, court action to obtain.
Yes, we were able to depose a corporate representative of ACOG in order to try to ascertain what is the support for this statement that they put out, that ACOG put out about APR, saying that APR isn't based in science. And some of the things we learned were very interesting in that deposition. For example, ACOG testified that they don't have any evidence that APR is unsafe. And the individuals who were involved in drafting that statement position were from the government affairs team. So it really isn't, it doesn't rise to the level of a clinical recommendation, this document that they put out saying that APR isn't based in science.
So this was a trial that's before the judge. So it's referred to as a bench trial. It means that the judge is really, what do they say, judge and jury, right? He's really the one absorbing all of the information. Give us a sense of what his task was to accomplish.
Yeah, so trials are for determining what the facts are. And so he was listening to each and every witness, and you could tell that he was listening very carefully. He asked a lot of curious questions. It was clear he was tracking with the science, and he was interested in the case. And so his job is to determine the facts on the ground. He will measure the credibility of each witness, and he will determine how much weight to give their testimony. So plays a very important role in kind of determining the next steps going forward.
And one of those experts that was a part of supposedly determining the case for the Attorney General was Mitch Crennan, who's the doctor who did a supposed study that about APR and reversal, and he was the very first witness called to the stand and was on the stand for a good bit. And there was some interesting dynamics that we uncovered in all of that, particularly about the fact that I think one of the issues has been like how small the study was for APR, and how such studies have flaws. But come to find out that Crennan's also suffered from some of those very same concerns.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the things that the AG was complaining about was that Heartbeat is relying on one main study about APR, and that's the 2018 Delgado study. It's not accurate that that's the only study that supports APR. There are others, not to mention just the biological plausibility of APR and a number of other factors. But it's going back to those ironies that we were talking about earlier. It's kind of ironic that the AG had an issue with APR allegedly being based off of one study that they say was seriously flawed. But then they had only one study to support their position, and that study had some serious flaws. For example, it was described as a double-blinded placebo-controlled study. But what came out in testimony was that the drugs used in the study looked very, very different. And even Dr. Crennan himself said he supposed it was pseudo-blinded, which is not a term that is used in studies, as far as I'm aware. So it was kind of ironic to see that playing out, that dynamic playing out of, well, if it's problematic for APR to be relying on one study and that study has its flaws, why is it okay for the AG to try to shut down this nonprofit organization that's offering free information and resources to women on the basis of also one study that also has a number of flaws? The truth is, there is no such thing as a perfect study. Every study has strengths and weaknesses. But it was very interesting to see some of the flaws of the Crennan study that really hadn't been fleshed out prior to this trial.
Well, plus you think of the ethical challenges, and it's like I just still to this day don't understand how an IRB passed that Crennan study, where he recruited women who were planning to abort their children only to apply progesterone to half of the group, and it was also a very, very small group, 12 women, ultimately only 10 women. and somehow that's ethical, because we would not want to ever put a child at risk whatsoever. And so even can some of these things be proven in that way? And Christa, that's something that you've talked about quite a bit, and you have a great kind of comparison for how that really works. That we have some real life opportunities to help people, and we can't always study them with this idea of a double blind study, because the control group would then be dead in some instances.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Jor-El, that this was an unethical study. His study did not prove what they sort of said it would prove. And as Dr. Crennan testified, he was unable to say that APR was unsafe or that it was not effective. He was unable to say that. He also testified, one of the things I found interesting in his testimony was that he prescribes progesterone for other reasons to his patients, which almost all doctors do. So OB doctors that's very common to prescribe progesterone. And so what he's saying is that I'll prescribe progesterone for all of these other things, but if a woman wants to continue her pregnancy, I'm going to withdraw that choice from her. And she no longer gets that choice, that opportunity. And so the irony, there's tremendous amounts of ironies in this case. And as he was testifying, another irony that was happening for me was that, and I guess it happened during the entire court case here, was that I was living the reality of Abortion Pill Rescue Network. I was being called out into the hall at times to help with a case that was actually happening right then, because I'm living the reality of the hotline and women needing help today. There are calls coming in right now, for example. And so as he's testifying that this should never be given as an option, there are women calling us and saying, I want help right now. Will you help me? And there are lives being saved at that exact moment. So I was living in like these two different realms that felt very opposed to each other and very ironic. And hearing about his study was heartbreaking, and hearing him describe it in such cold clinical terms also was heartbreaking, because these are real women that likely were drawn into this study and then ultimately were even if their pregnancies continued, were obligated to abort their pregnancy a second time according to the standards of the study, and that is unethical. Not a study that we would ever do to promote or to verify APR. And so our studies need to be a bit different to look at the safety and efficacy of abortion pill reversal.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate that you were stepped out of a courtroom defending APR to actually help with APR. But there's so many elements to even that statement, Christa, because it's not just that you stepped out and were part of that. You did, and you were. But that's also 1,000 other doctors that are saying yes and amen. This should happen in these situations, and they were willing and understood the science. They had all very much licensed and certified and all of that, making the decision that apparently Crennan would not do himself. And so grateful for those that stand with us in the Abortion Pill Rescue Network, on the hotline. The whole network is a part of this process, and grateful that even while we were fighting this battle for women, women were being helped. Let's talk about the actual moment of testifying, about what it was like to be on the stand. And I'm gonna jump in here, because I had that not nearly as much as you did, Christa, but I had the opportunity to be something that they call the person most knowledgeable, which is, if you know me, is just a funny term, because I don't know that I'm the person most knowledgeable about much of anything, but maybe a lot of things, but not anything in particular. And that was part of the adventure of preparing. If they were kind to put some things in print form, and I had binders. The binders were like this tall. They were like 5-inch binders. I had 4 of them. I had to study, and it's like, Danielle said, just study them on the plane when you're flying out there. It's like, so you can just imagine shoving 4 binders through the TSA line. No, I'm just kidding. I was able to just carry a few and study beforehand, but it's a lot of information to kind of cram for, because you don't necessarily know where they're going to go and what they're going to ask. for me, they kind of went at our financials, right? They wanted to get all of our financials. The kind of the narrative, another narrative that the Attorney General is trying to talk about is how Heartbeat International, even me personally, have been benefited by by APR from a financial standpoint. It's like, okay, let's do that, because that's not the story, that's not reality, that's what they're inventing. Maybe that's what they would find in other scenarios, but that certainly wasn't the case for us, because we don't in fact charge for what we do. I mean, this is a nonprofit. We are providing our services. We've even helped women purchase their progesterone. We don't have to do it very much, but we are willing to. Even our doctors are willing to do that as well, to help women have this one chance last chance to choose life. So when I was on the stand, it was really about they were using me to get some documents into the record, which I didn't fully appreciate at the moment, and then understood later why that was really important for them. And it really goes to that fact finding that Danielle was talking about. The court will establish what the facts are coming out of this, and that will affect appeals going forward and such. So they were using me in that. They were handing me big binders to do this, and that was a little clunky, but it apparently some of those things needed to happen. And then they wanted to start talking about the financials of Heartbeat International. And it's like, that's great. Yes, it took us a lot to actually add Abortion Pill Rescue Network to our team. We spend over $1.5 million every single year to stand the hotline up, to pay the nurses to work on that. We've been doing that. We do it with excellence. We've been able to market. We would do more if we had more. So it was easy to talk about that in some senses, because to me, it just spoke of the opportunity that we've had to serve so many people. We were happy to talk about the thousands of lives that we've discussed. We were able to even talk about some of the open letter that came from the moms, the APR moms. That was a very precious moment for me on the stand, to be able to have us show a video, which is on our webpage if you want to see it. I think we got to watch almost a little more than half of a 6-minute video of great pictures. And so to have that entered in, if that was the cost of me being on the stand, I was happy to do that and be a part of that. But Christa, you got to be there, and then you got lots of opportunities to be in the witness chair.
Yes, maybe too many opportunities. So at the moment, it was like, oh no, here I go again. I think I was called to the stand 5 times, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yeah,
like
and
you, go
one of
ahead.
those is like right at the end of the day, like they just had like half hour left, and it's like you've been prepping, you've been waiting, you thought you'd be on, a week earlier or 2 days earlier, and and then the day's almost over, and boom, you get your first shot, and it's just a very short one. So yeah.
Yes, it was a lot. And just like you, there was a lot of information. So I think my outline by the final edits, it was like 64 pages with redirect, 10 more pages. But I was so thankful for the attorneys that helped me prepare for all of that. So that was wonderful. But it's different than the public speaking that I normally do. I normally speak to people, and so you sort of feed from the crowd, and you have these reactions. And when you're in a courtroom and you're talking, there is no reaction, not even from your own attorneys. So even the moms who testified said, I don't think anybody in there liked what I said, but there isn't that same feedback. So it's as if you're talking just to the judge and just to God. That's all you really get. But as Danielle already said, the judge was very tuned in to the science. And also, I believe that he did listen to what I testified about how the hotline works and what we say to the women. I felt like he really did hear that very well. I was able to talk a little bit about what called me to this mission. Not that it's about me at all, but it shows our intention. It shows what we're trying to do. And I think that the narrative might be that, we're trying to manipulate women, that we're trying to give them a false hope, that we're giving them this false information, and to explain what our intention is and what we actually do is far different than that. And all of the evidence that we were able to present throughout the case contradicts all of that, of course, but to be able to share that and the honesty of what Hotline really is, it was a great opportunity to be able to just share the truth of what we're actually doing. And I did my very best to give like a day in the life of what an APR nurse is experiencing. And I hope that was helpful for the judge to understand what our intentions and motives are.
Well, yeah, and you heard the word objection once or twice, as I did. Not, I didn't hear it nearly as many as you did. Like there's a really weird rhythm to the being on the stand, and because you're like the attorneys are having a conversation as they're having a conversation with you and with the judge. It's like there's this awkward dynamic because it was just very different. The closest thing I could think of it was there was a time when I've been presenting and there were two translations happening at the same time. Like someone was translating into a language that someone else understood, and that's kind of what it felt like. It felt like because I'm like trying to answer a question, and there's this whole other conversation going on. It's like it's ideally suited for moms maybe because they can actually do that, but I was having a difficult time.
Yeah. And there was one time I know that I got confused. Am I supposed to answer or am I not supposed to answer? And how much am I supposed to answer what I was going to say? Because by now I don't even remember what my answer was, right? So it is a different dynamic. It's a different kind of conversation that is just very unnatural. That if you've not done this before, it's awkward. Yes.
Yeah, well, I don't ever want to do it again, much less, but hey, but we'll do what we have to defend abortion pill reversal. We're hoping that the judge really is leaning in, like you said, and we took comfort in that he's listening intently. He's got a big job to kind of figure out. We don't think it's that big of a job, frankly. We were wondering by day 2, like, why are we even here? They don't like they didn't seem like they really made their case like at all. Like they were chasing information that if you have a strong enough position to sue us to begin with, and then why do you need to chase down these like very small details and corners of spreadsheets that like you should have been able to bring your case, and it just feel like they didn't really do that. I'm sure that maybe they feel otherwise. Maybe they're patting themselves on the back and happy for closing arguments to come and think that they've done a great job. But I think we did a phenomenal. Our team did a great job. For me, listening to the lawyers become experts in the medical field was amazing. Because I'm not an expert in law or the medical field. So the fact that I was hearing lawyers talk like doctors would just show me what really lawyers have to do. I came away from the whole experience with a greater appreciation for what lawyers really have to do in order to get into these cases and to defend them as well as our team did. So we were grateful. Kind of Danielle was like, she's a lawyer, of course, in her own right, and but she was kind of she was a translation service of her own. She was kind of translating between the world, the warm, wonderful world of pregnancy help that helps women every single day, and then this kind of like cold legal reality that had to have a process and procedure for the courts. How all of that worked. Danielle, any kind of perspectives you want to share with us on that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting experience, and I'm so blessed to get to be in-house counsel and work day in and day out with pregnancy help folks, and this was just further affirmation that that's the right spot for me. I was grateful to be able to contribute to the litigation team and just be able to round out. I felt like they understood pregnancy help very well, and I think the Thomas More Society is very knowledgeable, and the attorneys knew a lot, but they don't know it day in and day out the same way that I do, and so I was able to really flesh that out and point out some things and just to help strengthen the arguments. And I was grateful for that experience. But I will tell you that I would prefer to stay working with my pregnancy help friends. That's a great spot for me.
Yeah, and we are grateful. Peter Breen, along with Peter Breen, Thomas More Society, Paul Jonah from Lamandry and Jonah, also connected with the Thomas More Society. Peter he started a pregnancy center. He actually opened a pregnancy center, was part of founding one, New Heartbeat, from years and years ago. So yeah, you're right. He knew the ministry, but really there were some dynamics that you were kind of really a great part of that team that had been assembled. So we are grateful for that. So you mentioned earlier what happens next. So we've got some briefs that are due to the court. So that's the briefs, meaning written form, and then what's next is actual closing arguments. Now, is this this is go and stand in front of the judge again, Danielle?
Yes, it is. We will be back out in Oakland, and I believe 3 hours have been allotted for that argument. So it's an opportunity for the lawyers to kind of like tie it all together. We heard 6 weeks, almost 6 weeks of testimony. There have been so many documents. I think Heartbeat produced 70,000 documents in this case, but there have been all kinds of documents and discovery and depositions and testimony and exhibits. And so this is an opportunity to really pull it all together and say, this is what matters in this case. And these are the facts that are operative. And this is how the law should apply to those facts. And so here's why we believe we win.
And what's at stake?
There's a lot at stake. First of all, there's the monetary side of things. The AG has asked for about $20 million in damages against Heartbeat International, and then hinted in their opening statement that they think that's a low estimate. So we may hear a different number in closing arguments. That's not a number that, Heartbeat doesn't have $20 million just sitting around. And so that would be extremely challenging. And, questions about how the ministry could continue under a judgment like that are very much open. At the same time, and perhaps equally or maybe even more damaging, would be the injunction that the AG has asked for. The AG has asked the judge to enjoin, which means prevent us from saying certain things. There's 8 specific statements at issue in the case. And if the judge granted that injunction, then Heartbeat could no longer say those things. And some of those statements are really specific things. But one of the ones that the AG has asked for an injunction on is the use of the term reverse at all. And so really operatively, what they've asked for is a gag order, that we wouldn't be able to speak this message at all, in my view. And so if the judge were to grant that, it would become extremely difficult for us to communicate about this option to women, because reverse is one of the most common things they look for when they're seeking these services.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. I guess we didn't say this at the beginning, although we said it in other times. Is the California Attorney General is not trying to stop the prescription of progesterone for this, but they are trying to stop speaking about the prescription for progesterone. So it's an odd scenario where the California Attorney General is simply advocating for the ignorance of its own population and the ignorance of women who, trapped in these situations, wanting to withdraw their consent from an abortion they no longer want, would have no idea where to turn to actually get that, even though it is available. So it's just unconscionable. The whole thing is, for sure. So we certainly want to encourage, as we kind of wrap up this Pregnancy Help podcast, we want to encourage a few things. There's a couple of key things to make happen. Christa, what do we want to make sure that we ask everybody to do?
I would say first off is to pray. Pray for those closing arguments. There's still tremendous amount of work being done by these attorneys, and they, as they wrap all of this up, and during that time of closing arguments in September also. And then to pray for the women today, to pray for the women tomorrow that are looking for help, and they're looking for that word reverse, and they're looking for somebody that can connect them to more help, and that's us. And so the fact that that may not be available in the future would be a tragedy, as I continue to say. And so women deserve the opportunity to continue their pregnancies when they would like to do that, and there should be the help available to them. So pray that that continues to be an option for women, that women continue to have the choice of abortion pill reversal.
Danielle, anything you'd encourage everybody to do?
We're praying for a full defense verdict here. There's lots of other potential outcomes, but the one we're looking for is a full defense verdict. At the same time, if it's not a full defense verdict, we are prepared to appeal if we need to. And so this could be a long road ahead, potentially. We don't know exactly when we'll wrap up the case with an ultimate outcome, even though we are expecting a potential ruling by December 16th. The case could go on longer after that. And so keep praying for stamina and clarity for our attorneys, and keep watching. We'll keep everybody informed about what's going on.
Well, and for us, it's California is just the first at bat, right? Because New York is looming in a similar way. That full defense win for us would be something that would affect for us positively the New York case. That would be very, very helpful. If we get something that isn't that, then we don't know what that means for New York, and then we just of course don't know who else is kind of waiting in the wings to do something similar. We know that there are, we know of the meeting that happened just a few years ago with Vice President Harris, where she met with all of the abortion state AGs, and they really talked about how to attack pregnancy help centers. And this to us feels like it's an outcome of that conversation and similar ones like that. So it's important to stay informed, be aware. The great news is that we are connected to the great lawgiver, the one who watches over all that we do, the one who, when we pray, and that was something we prayed for. We prayed, Lord, give us good counsel, and He sent us amazing lawyers. We prayed for favor in all kinds of ways, and we have seen that. We didn't count on the fact that stepping into the courtroom was going to feel like we were stepping back into the late 70s as far as decor, but it was one of the things that just kind of was part of the picture. It's like almost like the state of California wants to take us back into some history in the past where women simply don't have the resources that they need to change their mind. And so we are grateful that you stay with us, stay informed, stay in prayer, and we will continue to fight this battle because it's that important for the lives that we were saved. We know that thousands have been born because of the work of abortion pill reversal. We know that there are thousands more that need that same message and need the same opportunity.